bringing you a steady stream of thought-provoking ideas and cutting-edge innovation. You're listening to Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us on Society and the State. We are very happy to have today as our guest Patrick Byrne, who is CEO of Overstock.com. We're going to be talking today about Bitcoin and the underlying blockchain technology. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us today.
Connor, it's my honor to be on.
Well, you have made quite a name in the Bitcoin community. I've seen one outlet, I think it was Wired, call you the Bitcoin Messiah. And so as we get into what your interest in all of this is, can you start by sharing with our listeners, why was Overstock such an early adopter of accepting Bitcoin? As I recall, you were kind of the first major corporation to do it.
Yes, we were. I think there was a restaurant in Australia of $800,000 who was accepting it, and the community sort of thought it would be 5 to 10 years before they'd reach $1 billion, and we were $1.3 billion or $1.4 billion at the time when we said. So we like to think that we saved them 5 to 10 years in its adoption cycle.
Why did you choose to do it though? Like, what sparked your interest? What caught your attention? Why sign Overstock on as such a large company to a new technology like that?
Well, I'm pro-freedom, as are you, and my general theory is that we create these institutions that are supposed to allow us to go about our lives and do things together that we couldn't do before, without those central institutions. But those institutions have a way of getting corrupted and captured, right, and they become predatory. They extract from society. They extract from civilization. And a very good example is central banking. And so here we have this fiat currency. What we really need is some way to communicate with each other, information about value and scarcity. Those are two very key things that need to be communicated all through society, and we have invented something that does it. It's called price. That's what a price is, according to economists. It's a little piece of information about value and scarcity. And but currently, heretofore, we've had to do that communication through a medium that governments control, and that is fiat currency. Well, they can distort that communication field between us through central banking, through printing money, through doing what they have to do to keep their client, banks in business and such, or so they can extract from us without having to do it visibly through taxation, so they can do it through inflation. And they forget we don't work for them. We're not their batteries. We are humans that created them in order that we can accomplish ends of our own. And what a form of money like gold does is it gives us a very solid way to communicate through a medium that no government mandarin can just whisk new gold into existence with a law or a regulation or by signing something. And so it gives us a way to communicate with each other undistorted by the effects of government. Gold isn't going to work in a digital. Bitcoin comes along and it has a lot of the same properties as gold, and that it is limited, and that it also, no government mandarin can whisk new Bitcoin into existence. It's constrained by the laws of mathematics, the creation of Bitcoin. So to me, for those of us who are concerned about returning to liberty and limited government, to have a form of money that they don't control, and that it's a solid field through which we can communicate and not a field that they can distort, is a huge advance for human liberty.
Patrick, this is Brian Hyde, and I admit I'm a noob when it comes to cryptocurrencies, so I'm going to sit back here and kind of humbly absorb the wisdom that you and Connor are dispensing here. But you've mentioned the word central a couple of times in terms of central banking and centralization of control of currency. Is there any danger that Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies could become likewise centralized?
Depends on the coin. Bitcoin, one would think not. Someone would have to, for someone to have that kind of power, they would have to get to 51% of the total computation power of everybody who's involved with Bitcoin. That seems unlikely that that's going to happen. so not with Bitcoin, but there are other currencies which are have that. Well, for example, something happened with Ethereum, and it got hacked. So something happened in the code, and an authority came in, the creator, and just sort of reset history and reset. And it did a bunch of resetting within Ethereum, and it kind of split the Ethereum community between the purists who did not accept the reset and and those who did. But in general, no, the great advance of blockchain. See, the thing that makes all this possible is something called blockchain, and the key advance of it is you can have these systems with great integrity, but without a central authority overseeing or regulating or vouching for it. It's sort of you're turning from government to mathematics to provide that regulation and integrity.
What I find interesting, Patrick, about that split in the Ethereum community is that you basically you have within cryptocurrencies for now kind of this free market of currencies where people could vote with the computing power. People could vote with how they cashed out their coins or what they kind of stayed in, whether it was Ethereum Classic or mainstream, official Ethereum. And with fiat systems, you don't have that, I don't know if fungibility is the right word. You don't have that mobility where you can just come and go and very easily move between these currencies, where within cryptocurrencies, do you know how many coins there are? I mean, there's like hundreds right now, right?
Well, there are 800, but there's really 40 that are 99.99% of the value. So there are 40 altcoins that really matter, along with Bitcoin.
And so for you, it's not so much, Mr. Bitcoin Messiah. It sounds like you're not so much like there's the currency aspect of it, but correct me if I'm wrong. Your interest, especially as it pertains to, like Wall Street and regulatory issues, is more in the underlying blockchain technology. Would that be a fair characterization?
That's correct. The real advance is this thing called blockchain, which you can apply to what blockchain is. It's a ledger that's mathematically immutable, and that no central authority has to control. You can apply such a ledger to money and create a form of money such as Bitcoin, but you can also apply that ledger to other processes such as land titling or voting or capital markets, and say imagine creating a version of Wall Street where no one can cheat, where you're not relying on government regulators who can be bought and sold. You're relying on the laws of mathematics to govern the way the transactions can work in this ledger. And so you have a capital market that no one can cheat. They have to, Goldman Sachs has shown they can buy themselves regulators, they can buy themselves senators, they can buy themselves congressmen, may even have bought a judge or two, but not even Goldman Sachs can buy the laws of mathematics.
Now, you rattled off a couple examples, which I appreciate, because I wanted to ask you, looking forward in a decade, how do you envision blockchain technology really affecting the average person's life? My perception right now, being involved in the cryptocurrency world to the small extent I am, is that it's kind of the techno geeks right now. The comparison is often made that right now we're in kind of the Netscape Navigator days, or like the very early Telenet or email days, where we're not yet at the point where grandma can easily get on Internet Explorer or Firefox or Chrome. Do you share that perception that we're at that very early stage? And then looking forward, what applications do you see where this would actually improve or affect the average person's life a decade from now?
Well, when they go to when they register a car, it will be what I really think happens by a decade from now is we're all digital citizens. Our citizenship is recorded from birth certificate and Social Security. Everything is recorded in blockchain. When we vote, it is within blockchain. We don't have any of this Russia stuff. We don't have, although I guess nobody seriously thinks Russia hacked any of the actual voting procedures or machines, although that may not. I've heard it both ways. You don't have the Republicans say that there's a bunch of fraudulent voting, and the Democrats say you can't You can't ask people for their ID before they vote. All of that goes away. When you register a corporation, it would be registered in the blockchain. When the corporation goes to raise money, the certificates, the shares of the corporation, it's all recorded in blockchain. And it's immutable, and that there's no chance anyone can cheat. So I think there's all kinds of processes that we go about in our day. When we have notary publics, we sign contracts, and then we depend on lawyers to get the contracts, and then judicial system to adjudicate the contracts. There's a movement within this crypto community for smart contracts. These are contracts that self-execute. They're just an algorithm that wakes up at the appointed time, and they check some outcome. You and I, let's say I'm an orange grower and you're a Wall Street bank. I'm an orange grower in Florida, and I need to hedge my risk. If there's a frost, I lose my whole crop. So I'll buy a derivative contract that says if there's a crop failure, I get paid by you. If there's a freeze, I get paid by you. And then that can all be put into an algorithm that on an agreed upon date wakes up, it checks what's called an oracle. In this case, it'll be some company like the Weather Channel will be providing this information, and our algorithm checks was there a frost or not, and if there was a frost, then your money gets sent to me, and if there wasn't, my money gets sent to you, but it's all just built into a contract. It kind of eliminates the need for a judicial system. There'll be smart contracts that self-execute that don't need adjudication by judges and lawyers.
And so
it's going to affect everything.
Bringing back to the point you made earlier about kind of these middle managers that can be compromised and bought by the Goldman Sachs of the world, is it your point then that by connecting two people together, you're disintermediating, you're removing the mediator in the middle, and thereby removing the corruption that allows the orange grower and Wall Street to connect together? Is that kind of the sum total of what blockchain is doing?
Exactly. And it was a great concern of our founding fathers that in Federalist Number 10, Madison wrote about how we had designed this Constitution. We studied all the previous models of democracy, ancient and modern, and we looked at, I'll put this in my own words, we looked at what made them fail, and then we designed this Constitution so it would address all the different ways they can fail. But there's one issue that we don't think we solved, and it's the issue that democracies have founded on more than any other issue, and it is the issue of what he called factions, what I would call capture. So that really has been the Achilles heel of philosophical liberalism, that these are the institutions that we build get captured. We believe in government of law, rule of law, not men, but the legal institutions themselves be captured. The more they get built into blockchain, the more decision-making and execution gets moved into blockchain, the less there is for the predators to capture.
So it sounds like this is going to be a great decentralizer. I can only imagine that this is going to be disruptive to some certain industries and maybe even to certain bureaucracies. Do you see pushback, resistance coming from them?
Not the honest ones. It's kind of funny because I deal with regulators a lot. And the honest regulators want to see that they've gotten what blockchain is going to do. What it's going to do is make impossible a bunch of the mischief that they're in the business of preventing. It's going to make impossible counterfeiting. It's going to make impossible all kinds of cheating in the capital market. All kinds of mischief that goes on in Wall Street won't even be possible in a blockchain-based Wall Street. So a lot of regulators are very cool with it.
Patrick, one of my perception is Bitcoin always suffered from, being associated with, the dark net and the hiring assassins and selling drugs and so forth. And that what you see in Ethereum, in fact, most recently you have the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, you have massive corporations, you have Samsung and MasterCard and all these big companies signing on to this alliance to explore ways to use the Ethereum smart contract technology. Do you see that same contrast, and how do you project forward? Like, is Bitcoin always going to be this digital gold in value? Do you think Ethereum is going to supplant it and become the leader, or what's kind of your fortune telling you?
I'm really agnostic on that question. I don't know. I'm really agnostic among the altcoins and which is going to, so I'm not the guy to ask. Although when you think of money and the evolution of money, it starts off in most societies as a commodity, be it fish or loaves of bread or something. The first money is a commodity that everybody needs and can trade into, and that they can barter. They can barter whatever they have or whatever labor they have for that commodity, and it's a commodity that is ubiquitous enough and hence useful enough that it gradually turns into money. The same thing may happen with these altcoins. These altcoins have different virtues, and some have never been hacked, and some have been hacked, and so forth. And they have different virtues in terms of speed and what kind of information they can contain and such. So ultimately, maybe the same thing will happen with them as happened with primitive money, that the ones that emerge as the victors will be the ones that have the most usefulness, the most utility. And it's, on that score, Ethereum is outstanding.
Interesting. Well, final question, Patrick, for you. Overstock was an early adopter and continues to be in the news for being involved in kind of the blockchain Bitcoin space. You guys have kind of spun off a subsidiary now. Tell us about what you guys are doing with that and what we can expect in the future from Overstock and blockchain.
Yes, we have a subsidiary called Medici, named after the Italian bank that probably imported double entry bookkeeping into Europe. The Arabs had invented it. And Medici is our investment. It's like almost a VC/incubator for it's a VC incubator for blockchain-based companies. So we're investing in various blockchain companies. We've invested in a couple in Utah, as a matter of fact, but around the world. So sometimes we're funding our own development and doing our own ideas. Other times when people are there, we're just taking smaller positions in their companies and funding them. We have a tremendous company going in Barbados that is actually going to be releasing a product in September that is earth-shaking. It's blockchain meets central banking and payments. And then we have one in New York that is blockchain meets Wall Street. But we've also made investments in blockchain meets voting, blockchain meets land titling, and about three, maybe blockchain meets medical records. But there we've invested. So think of it as a VC/incubator that is doing outside investments, but also growing its own arms.
Patrick, it seems like society has become very comfortable with disruption, where you have, Airbnb and hotels and Uber and taxis and it seems to me you just rattled off a few as if it was, oh yeah, we're just disrupting this, that, and the other. It seems to me, and do you share the observation as we conclude here, that the public is very eager to adopt and embrace these new technologies because it's going to improve their lives? Is that your same outlook, or do you differ on that at all?
I know that's my outlook, and they ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, imagine this. Here's the biggest disruption. It may take 10 or 20 years to happen, but think of this. We collectively, allegedly, decide how much we want to be taxed, and then how much of that tax money should, say, go to fund the military. And we come up with an answer of, say, 4%. Suppose instead there was an online mechanism where our digital citizens could express their preferences about how much that should be. Let's say it's 4%. But then that money, if we're in a Bitcoin-based economy, that amount can be just automatically, programmatically shaved out of all the transactions within the economy and directed to the military. You no longer, the institution you have just disrupted is Congress itself, what you have is a tax system of taxing and funding that is, like I say, immutable, totally clean, impossible to corrupt, and you don't have to worry about. There's nothing for K Street lobbyists to distort. There's nothing, what really Congress is just, we're not supposed to worship Congress. Congress is just a mechanism that is allegedly allowing us to find out what we collectively think that we should spend on the military, and then we accomplish that through the IRS and stuff. You can accomplish all the stuff the same way without those institutions. So, yeah, we can disrupt central banking and land titling and Wall Street, but the ultimate disruption is, you could have all kinds of functions of government can be moved into the blockchain.
I like the sound of that.
Then, yeah. And, government about a year and a half ago started getting smart and realizing, blockchain is going to give us, it's not really, Bitcoin isn't really anonymous. It's pseudo-anonymous. And there's ways the government actually gets visibility into people through it.
Right.
But it works the other way, too. We're going to get fantastic visibility into government. We're going to get fantastic visibility. When we all allegedly decide that, we were going to have our tax money pay for some bridge across the river, and it turns out that the half of that money gets, or 90% of the money gets siphoned off and ends up in the bank account of the brother-in-law of the generalissimo. That will all be discoverable in a blockchain world, and it will be impossible for people to hide. So it's going to have a tremendous effect on corruption.
Radical change coming our way, and I love every little bit of everything you just said. Patrick, for those who want to learn more about Medici Ventures, where can they go?
Gee, I don't know if they even have a page up. We've been so stealthy. But contact Jonathan Johnson at overstock.com, jjohnson@overstock.com.
Jonathan's a great guy, and it's fun to watch him going around speaking about this stuff and being a blockchain evangelist. So we'll definitely be watching and waiting for the disruption. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us today.
Okay, so I may be a noob to this technology, Connor, but this is something I definitely want to pay attention to. The transparency part is really important, but the decentralization part speaks to me and tells me that we may have a tool here that we've been wanting for a long time.
What I found interesting in my own evangelism of this of late is seeing, my parents and seeing an aunt and seeing a friend, people who are not very super technologically focused. My dad, is, but like my mom isn't, and she's all interested in it. And the reason isn't because of the technology. The reason was because of the price increase, because especially Ethereum had this huge surge. All these people got interested. Everyone's talking to everyone about, oh my gosh, it doubled in value. And what's interesting is that created a vehicle of awareness to educate people about this technology. Whereas otherwise, if you just had this if Ethereum was at $8 like it was forever, and you say, hey, let me tell you about this disruptive technology, yeah, whatever. But when you see the market voting, when you see the vote of confidence of all of these people, and a lot of it's speculation, a lot of it's fear of missing out. But after taking all of that out, you still see an increase. You see these massive corporations coming into the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Those are signals, and those are signals of interest and votes of confidence. It gets lay people, non-techie people aware of what's happening, and I think a lot more excited about the potential. So it's all interesting stuff. Okay, everyone, so that's a wrap for today. We will link to the Wired article I mentioned. We'll link to the Medici Ventures information if you want to follow what Overstock is doing at our show notes page for today, which is societyandthestate.com/16. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.